Hey, it's America's Supermom. Thank you for joining me on my podcast. This series is the Corona Chronicles. I created this so that we would have an outlet of positivity in the midst of a lot of negativity. You know what I'm talking about. All the news, the fear around this virus, how it can affect us, what the new normal is looking like, and how so many things have changed that a lot of people feel like um, it is the end of the world, so to speak. So, this podcast was created so that those of us who have hope, who are willing to move forward with this new normal and innovate new things that will help us to be creative and positive. That is what this platform is for us to come together and share that positivity and that light with those who may need it. So if you're interested in sharing your insight, please reach out because we can never have enough positive news. So sit back and enjoy the show.
I want to thank you guys for listening today. I am really excited about my next guest. We actually met organically on Facebook through a Facebook group, and I'm really excited to have her here today. We've been able to connect on a couple of occasions, and I just feel like we're sisters in a sense of having the opportunity to overcome a lot of our obstacles in life and just the mindset of being positive and giving back and sharing our insight to help others live a better life and be a better version of themselves. So, my guest is Kenya Halliburton. And at this time, I'm going to give her the opportunity to share a few words about who she is before we dive into our interview.
Yes. Hello, Lachelle. Thanks for having me on. Um, I'm Kenya Halliburton. I am a mompreneur of three.
Mm-hmm.
I am also what I like to call a life friendly online business choreographer. And what I do is I work with women entrepreneurs, specifically speakers, authors, coaches, consultants, et cetera, to build life friendly and profitable businesses online. And uh, I find that this work, especially in this time that we're living in, helping women create opportunities in spite of kind of some of the things that are happening, the things that life is throwing our way right now, has been such a
Mm-hmm.
blessing. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just excited that, I mean, I think up until this point, things have, working online and working from home has been appealing to a lot of people. But I think now it's even more um, important than ever to create opportunities outside of the traditional way that we are used to working. So,
Ab- Absolutely. I think that is so true. And so right now, being a mompreneur, working from home and, a lot of this with our kids being at home, what are some uh, strategies that you have used in order to maintain productivity and just being in a good state of mind with that
hmm
happening?
yeah, one of the most important things for me, and it's something that I started doing quite a while back, is to get up
Mm-hmm.
early. Um,
Okay.
I like getting up early as a strategy because, you create space to kind of get your mind right, get centered, create
Mm-hmm.
intention around your day, have your you time before, things start to stir in the house. So I think becoming an early riser is
Mm.
is something that has definitely worked for me and I encourage others to do as well. Um, and I think also just kind of planning out your day. I know, because I work from home and the children are at home or when they're at home, I like to have a cutoff time to my work day.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and so, of course, with them at home, there is some overlap. between, the work time and, kind of tending to their needs. But I like to just kind of have a cutoff time, like 2 o'clock, is the end of the work day, the official work day, and just carve
Mhm.
out quality time and moments for them because, I think
Mhm.
sometimes it's easy to just kind of allow them to kind of do their thing on their electronics. But, I think this is a great moment for us to create memories and moments that we will remember. And
Mm.
so I think those are, two of the main strategies that I implement is getting up early. So I think that getting up early is the critical thing because the earlier that you can get up and kind of get your you time and then actually get some work done before the kids actually get up makes you feel productive enough so that you don't feel like you have to cram. You don't feel behind. You don't feel like they cram
Mm.
everything in your day and feeling all off balance because you're like, got to get this done, but the kids need this and
Right.
So
Right. So true. Now, so what are the ages of your kids?
they are 12, 11, and 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, they still are at that age to where they do notice if you're engaged in something, or because we have it where we have the teenagers or the older ones that are just like, hey, whatever,
Mhm.
they're just in their own zone. But yeah, that age group is kind of a challenge sometimes,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
then just their interaction with each other.
Yes.
So, right now, we have a lot of current events around, just the whole racial tension that's going on.
Mhm.
So, with your kids and just personally with business and whatever, what actually are some good strategies that you would recommend for other parents who may be dealing with some of these issues that are in the media right now?
Yeah, I like just having conversations with my kids.
Mhm.
Checking in with them to see kind of what they're thinking and um, what their thoughts are. If they're exposed to any, um, i- if they're exposed to information that maybe is problematic, and just being able to kind of touch base with where they are. The other thing
Mhm.
I think for me that has been important, and this is new for me. Um, I,
Mhm.
I I I regret to say that it's new for me, but I feel like now I've been called to be a little bit more intentional or a lot more intentional about educating them on
Mm.
the the history of events in our country. I realized, some time ago my oldest shared with me that he thought racism was over. And I
Mhm.
thought, wow, like how how innocent is that perspective, but how problematic
Mhm.
is it as well? And because there are forces that he's going to grow up into without really having a understanding that no, it's not. It's gotten better in some ways, but it's become more hidden in some ways, and that's a problem. And so I think that for me, educating them, pulling up the old videos that I know I used to watch when I was coming up in grade school, and the
Mhm.
information that I was exposed to, exposing them to that information. I mean, we live in a really connected world, right? Where all the
Mhm.
information we could ever want is really at our fingertips. And so I found myself, watching the movies, the documentary, The 13th, and different things that exist on the online to help expose them to the history and just kind of have a dialogue with them about what things have been in the past and what things to kind of be conscious of in the present and so on and so forth. So I mean, it's a really challenging conversation, right?
Mhm.
But it's, I think it's definitely necessary and really important.
Mhm. That is so interesting. So, what was it that really sparked him to think that racism was not going on? I mean, do you think it's just the way that you guys discuss it, just his environment? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think from what I can see, it's just, my children, I was raised in a predominantly black environment. Um,
Mhm.
and they're raised in a predominantly integrated environment. So they're going to
Mhm.
school with, other people of other ethnicities, and they're playing with them, and they just haven't experienced any of what, you would traditionally connect to that. And in addition,
Mhm.
some of the things that they have been exposed to in school, has painted a picture that, oh, well, Dr. Martin Luther King and the Rosa Parks and these things happened, and they made Black people, have better lives here. And so I think the way that information is being presented to them, in the outside world has painted a picture of, oh, we're good. And so when they come up
Mhm.
against these other, like my children, they always, when we have these conversations, they're absorbing it, but you can tell like they have this look of, huh? you know, they have
Right.
this look of
Right.
confusion because it's kind of cognitive dissonance. It's like, I mean,
Mhm.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't really see it, at the moment because they're really young. So, they
Mhm.
don't really make that connection. So I believe that a lot of it is just, you know, the way that the information that they're exposed to and not exposed to in school. And then of course on my end, what I'm saying and what I'm not saying as well. That's kind of allowing
Mhm.
them to say, oh, things are great, you know. So
Now, so this is just interesting because I had never really considered this because you have different um, people who talk about this subject differently to their
mhm.
children based on maybe what they've experienced
Yeah.
themselves. So, thinking about it now, just because you bring this up, where to consider that they might not even be aware of it, do you think that the conversation needs to be discussed because you feel like they are going
Mhm.
to have a problem with it? Or do you feel like because maybe they're being naive or whatever the case may be? Or do you believe that maybe they could be the ones that just don't experience it based on the environment and the outlook they have about life?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of twofold for me. One is that, yeah, I don't want them to be naive. And I think
Mhm.
the reason why that is important to me is because, you have young boys being impacted and killed and jailed,
Mhm.
young black
Mhm.
men. Um, in the case of the Central Park Five, those children were wrapped up in the justice system and they didn't understand their rights. They didn't understand what was happening to them. And because of that, they were afraid. And that fear allowed the fear just kind of fueled a lot of what they were, um, experiencing. And so
Mhm.
I don't, I want them to have an awareness. I don't want them to, I try not to instill my fear in them, but I just want to expose them to,
Mhm.
this is what's happening. And, you know, for them to just have that seed planted in them so that if they're in a situation or in a circumstance where there's some sort of, racial or discriminatory practices being, thrust upon them, they can recognize it as such. Um, and so I
Mhm.
think knowledge is really important. I teach my children to think for themselves, and whether it's a
Mhm.
parent or a 30 figure telling them information, I encourage them to ask questions respectfully, of course, but ask questions
Mhm.
and try to
Mhm.
try to understand and draw your own conclusions from what's being said. um, and I think that's the
Mhm.
important part of showing them information and then allowing them to ask
Mhm.
questions about it. Because
Mhm.
if you just kind of shove something down their throat and say, hey, this is, what this is, and we've gone through this and this and that, and you don't allow them to kind of explore the information on their own, then that's part of the problem, right? It's just as bad for a white family to say, black people are this and black people are that, and not allow any of that back and forth to say, why do you say that, mom and dad? And it's just as bad for a black family to say, you know this is what it is, and this is how we've been treated, and this is why we feel like this about white people, without having letting that other side of the conversation happen. It's just indoctrination, and it just continues to perpetuate the issues that we've been experiencing. At least that's my point of view.
Mhm. Yeah, cuz it can be a challenge. I know I had a conversation with my mom over the weekend, and she was one of 12
Mm,
kids, and she only had one, which was me, and then I had,
mm,
15. And she would go through a period of mourning. Every time I was having
mm,
another baby, she would just be depressed, and we couldn't talk to her for a couple of weeks. I mean, this went on through every pregnancy until about the eighth one. Then she kind of got snapped out of it. But we were having this conversation because her fears about her parents who ended up getting a divorce and
mhm,
seeing her mom be a single parent, and all the things that she felt she witnessed, she had this mindset, she said, that she was reliving it every time I was having another baby,
mm,
those same
mhm,
feelings. And she had feared that the same thing was going to
mhm,
happen to me. And it just affected her so much that she just couldn't
mhm,
snap out of it. And so I just posed that question because where do we kind of draw the line where, you know, okay, her parents got a divorce when she was a teenager, and, they never got remarried, but, here I am 27 years into a marriage, and,
mhm.
and I didn't have that issue. So, where do you draw the line as a parent with
Yeah.
informing but not placing that fear on your kids? Because we
Mhm,
can have a new
mhm.
beginning. We're out here protesting, and it's like, are we going to recognize what a new life looks like if we still are
Right.
holding on to the past to some extent?
Yeah,
You know what I'm
I
saying?
completely understand, and I think it's an interesting question. I think the issue for me, and from what my observation is, that you can't move forward without addressing the issue at hand. So I think the way that I view it, I've heard stories and different people from like Africa talk about how they dealt with
Mhm.
the issues that the apartheid and everything that they dealt with, which is similar to what we dealt with here in America. And they brought it all out in the open. It was like, here, this is what we dealt with. They talked
Mhm.
about it, they had the conversations, and they moved on. And it's not that there aren't any
Mhm.
issues, but you don't really hear the type of issues there that we have here. And the way that it was described is like, we just had the conversation. We talked about, like, this is what you did and this
Mhm.
is how it impacted us, and so on and so forth. And the other side listened, and they were able to come to an understanding to say, okay, like, we did that. We understand that was wrong. This is how we're going to move forward together. And my perspective is, I
Mhm.
feel like all of us have work to do in terms of educating, because I think for a long time we have just ignored, like, okay, this happened, just sweep it under the rug. Oh, these laws have passed that made life better for us, and let's just pretend like it's not happening. Let's pretend like that didn't happen. Let's not deal with it. Let's move forward. But the problem is there's trauma, right? Like
Mhm.
even in the example that you've given with your mom, there's
Mm.
trauma that for one reason or another never got released. That fear never got discussed, that fear never
Mhm.
got expelled. And so there are triggers that happen. And so if you don't have a safe place
Mhm.
or a place where you feel like you can put that, a place where you can feel like you can express that without it being thrown back on you and saying like, well, you have a problem because you should have got over that. You know, it just
Mhm.
festers and it creates more fear and it creates more, everybody just kind of clams up and runs to their corners. And anytime someone shares their feelings about something that hurt them, they're is dismissed or that kind of thing. So it just kind of keeps fueling it.
Mhm.
So I think that my perspective has been that for Caucasian Americans, for them to do the work, educate themselves on the history of this country, especially when it comes to Black and Brown people. There's a lot of they don't know. They're not. They don't have to look at it. They're not forced to learn it in
Mhm.
schools. They're not forced to understand things from our perspective. And so they a lot of them just don't know.
Mhm.
And so they are walking around in this kind of haze of like what's wrong with you? Like get over it. It's not that bad. Like that happened. I'm not my ancestors, whatever the case may be. And I do think that
Mhm.
the younger
Mhm.
generation um is amazing because they have grown up in a world where we're so interconnected and a lot of them are intermingled and they are a voice to all of us to say this is how we can move forward together because we love each other. Like
Mhm.
what's wrong with y'all? But I do think that and it
Mhm.
is the young people that are coming back to the parents. Like I have a one of my white sisters. She was saying she was like, "Thank God for my children because they're calling me on my stuff. They're telling me, Mom, like you shouldn't be thinking like that, and that's inappropriate, and so on and so forth." And so and on my black friends, some of the friends that I have that grew up during the civil rights era, they're like, well, we kind of dropped the ball because, as things improved, we just kind of moved with that improvement, but we didn't instill some of the things that we had learned in our children. And so some of that knowledge was lost. And so
Mhm.
I think, when we're ignorant of things, it causes a lot of problems. So, I understand the aspect of you don't want to indoctrinate people with fear. And that's something that I really, really
Mhm.
try when I'm speaking to my children. Like I'm conscious of it, like how I say things and how I
Mhm.
phrase things because I do have baggage. And so that's why it's kind of like,
Mhm.
helping facilitate question and answers. And sometimes if I say something and I don't catch myself, they'll be like, "Well, what does that mean?" And I'll realize like, "Okay, all right, let me let me address this in a way that doesn't fill them with fear." you know. So I think that if, white
Right.
people do their work on their end and they do that self-development work and,
Mhm.
try to understand what went wrong and do their work. And black people, if we do our work, and I think if everybody's working on
Mhm.
themselves, then we can come together and do something positive and begin to put this stuff behind us. But I think until we all realize that we're human. There's good parts of us, there's parts of us that's dark.
Mhm.
And until we address the darkness, I think we're never
Mhm.
really going to be able to move past and heal because we run from the darkness. It's like, oh, I don't want to look at that side of myself that, you know, but it's like if we look
Right.
at the light, say, look, just because you have darkness doesn't mean that you're a person. I mean, like, this in you that you need to
Mhm.
really address, you know? to heal. So that's kind of how I look
Mhm.
at it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. That's good. Now, so talk to us about, we're switching gears here to, helping other women entrepreneurs, be in a place to where they can find ways to position their businesses. I love the term that you had. Let me see. I'm always taking notes here. Um, about being a business choreographer,
Life
or
friendly
how did
online
you
business
say it?
choreographer. uh
Yes, because even that is very unique and, just sends a message of
Mm.
something new and different. So, talk to us about, that process, how you came up with that name and, some tips that you could give to people right now, because a lot of people are thinking, what am I going to do next, with this pandemic kind of
Yeah.
changing the landscape of their industries
Yeah.
or different
So
things
funny
like that.
enough, I have the mind that I think we believe it gives a or breadcrumbs. It's like a pattern of what we're called to do.
Mhm.
And early on in my life, I was very drawn to music and dancing. And um, when I was younger, I thought when I
Mm.
grew up, I was going to be this choreographer to the stars, this dancer, and this songwriter. And so early on in my young adulthood, I was pursuing a career in the music industry. And um, that didn't go so well because, it's a bit of a industry and I'm just not made for it. So, um, I ended up getting married and kind of
Mhm.
putting that behind me. But I found that, in my professional career, I you know, support and a lot of the job, making connections, creating systems and office run smoother and all of that fun stuff. And so I ended up, my husband's in the military. We ended up moving, and I decided, you know what, let me create a business on my own. I was always very entrepreneurial, and I started as a virtual assistant, creating a business where I'm helping other people virtually, manage their businesses and stuff. And I really love the idea of marketing. And when I started marketing my business, there was just all these moving pieces, right? As a business owner, there's all these moving pieces. You're marketing, you're managing, you're serving clients, there's all this stuff. I began to train as an online
Mhm.
business manager. I began to get into social media strategy and management. And just, I noticed over time, I ended up having this knack for choreographing all of these things. I didn't realize that's what it was until I thought about, like, well, when I was dancing,
Mm.
I would have a piece of music and I would create dance moves and have myself and all the other dancers to this music. So we worked, everything moved in concert together to create a beautiful performance. And I thought, how different is that from what I'm doing in business, right? Um, there's all these moving pieces,
Mm.
but you want it all to sync together beautifully so you can create profit and you can create it in such a way that your life is affected positively by it, right? And so that's kind of where I just made the connection from,
Mhm.
when I used to do choreography in dance and music to what I was doing with my clients and in my business. And so um, I think along the way, along my journey, life has always been the constant variable. And I'm I have
Mhm.
these goals, I have these things that I want to accomplish, but life can be over here doing its own thing, like not paying attention to nothing that you want to do, know. And and so I
Absolutely.
talking to other women, I realized that they were going through the same thing. Like they had these great intentions, these big ambitions to do things, and then life would come and sweep, the winds of life would blow and knock them all around. And so I think for me, it's been important to help women, especially, create businesses that were steadfast despite the winds of life. Um, and so, in saying that, I think in this moment,
Mhm.
one of the things that I think is beautiful is that with challenge comes opportunity, right? And so we have this opportunity
Mhm.
to pursue our passions in the silence, in being quarantined, and all of these things. Have the awakening to say, I have the opportunity to share times with the world and get paid for it. And so I think one of the main things that I would suggest, and I was having a conversation with one of my clients the other day who, had all these projects she wanted to do. She wanted to do a book. She wanted to do a podcast. She wanted to start her virtual assistant business. And as we began to talk, she had such passion for the things that she wanted to share. And we were like, you know what? Start off with a podcast. It's the easiest way to just start to put yourself out there. And so I think one of the main tips that I would give is find a really simple way to just
Mhm.
start putting yourself out there, right? Whatever it is, get
Mhm.
on video,
Mhm.
start sharing your story, get on the podcast, start sharing your ideas or the things that you have, post pictures of your art or whatever it is that you do. Find a way to just get it out there and start creating that
Mhm.
momentum and building your confidence and letting people know that you exist to solve challenges
Mhm.
that they or desires that they have.
That's good. I like that because,
Mhm.
analysis can put you in paralysis, thinking about, well, what's the best way and all this. And so, one of the things that I thought was even more incredible for you to
Mhm.
say is a simple way. A lot of times we think, oh, it
Yeah.
has to be something complex. I've got to have, a book or, I got to get with this celebrity.
Yeah.
We just think where we want to go, but don't realize
Mhm.
that it always
Mhm.
starts with one single step. You know, we have to kind of keep that in perspective. And those simple things really give you the traction
Yes.
and momentum to keep moving on to bigger things. So I think that's a great point. Um, what is the best way
The
for the
best way
audience
to
to
get
get
a
a hold
hold
of
of
you?
me, you can find me on all the social media sites at Kenya Halliburton. Um, that's Halliburton with two L's.
Mhm.
Or one of the best
Mhm.
ways to connect with me is to join our Girl on Fire tribe, which Lachelle is a beautiful part of. You're doing so amazing with doing your
Yes.
masterclass. I'm so excited about that. But yeah, the Girl on Fire tribe is a free Facebook group,
Mhm.
and we are focused on women come
Mhm.
together and live together. So it's a sisterhood. If you have a business, if you're thinking
Mhm.
about starting a business, if you just need a community of support to kind of work out your goal journey or your
Mhm.
success journey with, this is an amazing community to be a part of.
So true. I concur. It's great. And what are some final words that
I
you would share with the audience?
I think one of the most important things in this moment it for our listeners is to really sit down and reflect in this moment on what it is you want. Um, what do you want your life to look like on the other
Mhm.
side of it? And really allow yourself to feel what that feels like,
Mhm.
and then begin to ask yourself, what are the simple steps that I can take now to make that happen?
Mm.
Mhm.
That's good. Great advice. Great advice. Well, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity to come together, Kenya, and looking forward to even more opportunities for
Yes,
us to
me too.
collaborate in the
Absolutely.
future. And
Thank you.
all
You too,
right.
Lachelle.
Well, you have a wonderful day, okay?
Bye bye.
All right. Talk.
Thank you for joining me on this episode. I really enjoy providing content that inspires and challenges us to be a better version of ourselves. If you are interested in being a guest on the show, please email me at info@lachelleadkins.com. You can also reach out to me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, or my YouTube channel. If there was something in this episode that resonated with you, it probably will resonate with someone else. So please share it. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. But those aha moments, those moments of really getting something and changing your perspective are very, very pivotal in having people change the trajectory of their lives. And so being able to share insightful information so that other people can grow is the easiest thing that we can do as we pay it forward. So again, I want to thank you all for listening. And if you have time, write out a review. Go to iTunes, Anchor, wherever you can find this podcast on any of those platforms, and write a review about what impact this episode had on you, what you learned, or whatever. Any feedback is great because it just helps me to understand what content is really beneficial for those that are listening. So again, I want to thank you all for your support and taking the time to spend some time with me and my guests. And I wish you a wonderful day. Thanks for listening.